Okay, we're going to start with what's become a very special part of the closing of the Freedom Conference. Back in 2016, the Steamboat Institute created the Courage and Education Award to recognize and encourage leadership and courage in promoting intellectual diversity on college campuses and in advancing conservative thought and policy. The Courage and Education Award is granted each year to an institution, member of academia, or student who demonstrates a commitment to open inquiry, free speech, and intellectual diversity, traditional ideals of higher education which have been usurped in recent years in favor of identity politics and free speech restrictions. Previous winners of the Courage and Education Award include Bruce Benson, the longtime president of the University of Colorado, who inspired us to start the Campus Liberty Tour debate series. In 2017, Brandon Van Dyke, assistant professor of government and law at Lafayette College. In 2018, Wallace Lowe, president of the University of Maryland. In 2019, Samuel Abrams, professor at Sarah Lawrence College in New York City. In 2020, Hillsdale College. And in 2021, Jameson Brogy, second lieutenant in the United States Marine Corps, and also a member of Steamboat Institute's Emerging Leaders Council. This year's recipient is one you've already met and heard from this weekend, but we all agreed, our board, that we could not find a more worthy recipient for the Courage and Education Award this year. After a long and impressive career at the Cato Institute, Ilya Shapiro, earlier this year, was named executive director of Georgetown University's prestigious law school's Center for the Constitution. Shortly before he was to assume his new position in January, Ilya was placed on administrative leave by the university after he spoke out against President Biden's statement that his next Supreme Court nomination would be based on race and gender. Now, yesterday, as you know, we discussed the firestorm that was unleashed by a simple tweet he made and subsequently apologized for. During the past several months, Ilya has redoubled his efforts as an outspoken advocate for the First Amendment and combating cancel culture in America. In early June, Georgetown reinstated Ilya, but made it clear that he could be subject to further disciplinary action depending on statements he might make in the future. Rather than subject his family to continued attacks and to work in a clearly hostile environment, Ilya made the principled decision to step down from his position, taking a courageous stand against a university which seeks to silence diversity of ideology. In recognition of his fearless efforts as an advocate for the First Amendment and for combating cancel culture on American college campuses, Steamboat Institute is proud to award its 2022 Courage and Education Award to Ilya Shapiro, Senior Fellow and Director of Constitutional Studies for the Manhattan Institute. Congratulations, Ilya.
Thanks very much, Jennifer. Thanks to all of you for making this possible, for making this wonderful organization now in its 15th year that I've come to know and love really what it is. Tell all your friends all over the country, not just in Colorado. This is a wonderful group that does valuable work in general and for the next generation as well, which is so important. Thanks also to I think one of my sons took my microphone off my lapel. There are two over there, Jacob and Charlie. Wave at everyone, boys. And my mother-in-law, Diane, they, and of course my wife, Kristen, back home, had to live with all of this while I was living with it. And it's often harder, as you know, when a loved one is going through a time of trouble. And I'm so gratified. I've gotten to know the value of family, of friends, of allies. One thing that definitely such an experience teaches you is who your friends really are. I'd rather not have had the reason to know, of course, but it's been humbling and gratifying to know that there are people completely unbidden, some of whom I had never met or maybe not talked to in a decade, that came out and forcefully, either publicly, privately, or both, made valuable statements to that effect. And I'm glad that I can finally appear on this stage accepting a Steamboat Award. I had, in the early years of the Blankley Fellowship, had applied for that, but didn't quite get there. So I thought, how can I finally make the award stage at Steamboat? And I thought, well, I guess I need to leave Cato and join some academic institution, and then I need to have some sort of scandal, but not too bad. And maybe some ambiguous tweet. I don't know. And so I'm glad that scheme finally worked out. But fundamentally, what this episode has taught me and what I'm trying to use this moment for, as has come out from several speakers during our wonderful conference, and that is Alexander Solzhenitsyn's mantra of live not by lies, right? Life is too short, and even if evil or bad things triumph, let you not be a part of that. Let it not be done through you. And so I sort of feel like I'm getting this award for not quitting, I guess, for 4 months, and then quitting, to sum it up. But none of those decisions, the strategies of what to do and how to put out a press release and whom to contact and all of that took a lot of work and effort and thought. But the decision not to quit and then the decision to quit, those were probably the easier parts of the whole to do. But this problem that I've lived is not limited to the ivory tower or leafy quads. The trend of canceling speakers rather than challenging them also represents a loss of grace in our culture more broadly. The desire to ascribe malign motives to one's political enemies and unwillingness to think of them as merely wrong rather than evil. Given the left's control of the commanding heights of culture, education, technology, those expressing conservative views are much more often targeted by both online and real-world mobs. But it happens to lefties too, like Whoopi Goldberg, if you recall her ignorance about the Holocaust. I don't think that was anti-Semitism. Or the David Frenches of the world, those conservatives who are not sufficiently MAGA and things like that. Even worse, though, it happens to regular people. Forget celebrities or those like me who have platforms, but regular people whose meager donations to politically incorrect causes gets them doxxed, boycotted, fired, or in Canada, frozen out of their bank accounts. This cancel culture is easy to diagnose, but hard to remedy. Too many people have lost sight of the golden rule of treating others as they wish to be treated. Although often ascribed to the Bible, that principle really doesn't rely on any faith tradition. As American society is secularized, politics has replaced religion to fill that spiritual need that human beings have, that they've had since time immemorial. In that context, it's easy to see one's political opponents as heretics. And then, of course, their sacrilege isn't worth tolerating or hearing. The problem goes beyond academic freedom or speech on campus, worrying as developments in those areas are for the next generation, especially young lawyers who will face much more challenging situations than speakers who might offend them. It's even more important to have a national reckoning about our apparent inability to discuss controversial issues without canceling those with whom we disagree. How are we to continue as a nation if every policy disagreement is existential and every election a Manichaean battle? What Georgetown subjected me to, what it would have subjected me to if I had stayed, was a heckler's veto that led to a star chamber eventually. And so, live not by lies was the mantra that I adopted. Let the lie come into the world, Solzhenitsyn wrote, let it even triumph, but not through me. I couldn't live that way, so I made what lawyers call a noisy exit. When Justice Thomas recently withdrew from the class that he'd been teaching at the George Washington University Law School, it was just the latest example of the poisonous atmosphere in academia that makes it impossible to have a free exchange of ideas. GW administrators had admirably stood up to the mob, demanding that he be canceled for his vote overturning Roe v. Wade, citing academic freedom guidelines. Still, the justice presumably figured it wasn't worth the aggravation and the heightened security. It's a shame that Justice Thomas felt the need to withdraw, and a stark contrast to the announcement that the newly retired Justice Breyer would be teaching a class at Harvard this fall. That's a shameless double standard that university officials are allowing to spread. I'm generally long on America. Like Justice Kavanaugh, if you recall his confirmation hearings, he talked about living on the sunrise side of the mountain, particularly apt in the Rockies, I think. But I'm pessimistic about academia. Perhaps we've passed peak woke in society writ large. I really am, as many of you we've discussed this weekend, seeing green shoots as normal people concerned with their families and livelihoods rather than performative virtue signaling called BS on progressive fascists, for lack of a better term. The pandemic showed a lot of parents that the faddish theories their kids were being taught in school, and they didn't like it. But we may have passed the point of no return in terms of the illiberal takeover of academia. And I do mean illiberal. What we're saying isn't the decades-old complaint about liberal professors. I don't think the ideological ratio has changed hardly at all since I was in law school 20 years ago or college 25 years ago. But weak administrators who placate the radical left. So I'm pessimistic that anything will change at any school where academic freedom and free speech aren't supported and where rules against hecklers' vetoes aren't enforced. Too few administrators follow the example of University of Chicago former President Robert Zimmer, who in response to pressure to punish Professor Dorian Abbott for writings that criticized affirmative action, reaffirmed the university's commitment to faculty members' freedom to disagree not just with public policy, but any policy of the university. Wherever deans and presidents stand up for free speech and the core truth-seeking mission of any academic institution, the mob disperses. But unfortunately, most university officials are spineless cowards. That's the irony and the sardony, really, the bitter irony of the cancel culture issue in academia, which I think is much easier to solve on individual campuses than larger cultural currents. But the problem isn't that deans like Bill Traynor at Georgetown or Heather Gerken at Yale are radicals. It's that they're spineless cowards who are unwilling to confront the illiberal inmates who have taken over their institutions, including as fellow administrators heading up DEI offices. Mere statements about academic freedom and declining to fire Supreme Court justices aren't enough. Schools have to affirmatively instill a culture of respect for opposing views and civil discourse. Thank you very much. Live not by lies.